Welcome back to Our Issues Milwaukee. I'm your host, Andrea Williams. If you're just joining us, we've been talking with Milwaukee County Executive Chris Abele. Welcome back to the show.
Great to be here.
Now, County Executive, in November of 2015, you appointed Dr. Damon Means, who is the superintendent of the Mequon-Thiensville School District, as the state-mandated Opportunity Schools and Partnership Program Commissioner. Let's talk about what that is, because needless to say, this has grabbed headlines. There's been opposition, controversy, a lot surrounding this. So tell us first and foremost, how this got established and where we are today.
So the bill that at the state level that created this was authored by State Senator Alberta Darling and State Representative Dale Coinga. What it does is it creates essentially a separate school district, MPS. What Senator Darling and Representative Coinga have said their intent is to try and bring positive change to MPS. They're concerned about the number of schools that are seen as failing. I have spent, long before I was county executive, I spent a lot of my time in philanthropy, and I've worked with a lot of organizations that work with MPS, and I've also worked with the MPS. And when they first told me about this, what I said is, look, I'm familiar with some of the recovery districts around the country, and none of them have really worked nearly as well. I mean, you can't point to any of them and say, well, that's a perfect success. In fact, there's some real issues. And I said, idea of helping MPS, great, but this isn't the way I'd approach it. And I said, if I'm going to do this, I'm not going to appoint somebody who's going to be doing voucher schools. I still think the voucher funding flaw is exactly that. It unduly punishes Milwaukee, and I think they should fix it. I still think that the state should restore funding for education, and not just K through 12, but the UW system. We've had 2 biennial budgets where the state has cut education. I said there's a lot of tension already between different modalities of schools in Milwaukee, and I don't want to be, just the newest front on some new war about who, what works or who wins. And I'm not going to do anything to hurt MPS. I have great respect for Dr. Driver, and we're going to work with her. So instead of appointing a voucher type person, I appointed Dr. Damon Means, who himself is an MPS graduate. He's spent his entire professional career in public schools and is a huge believer and supporter of public schools. His wife's a principal at MPS. His sister is, I believe, a teacher at MPS. And he also has long been vocal about being, fix the funding flaw and more funding for education. So we looked at the law and we thought, how can we, implement this in a way that first doesn't hurt MPS, but ideally can help MPS. So what we've proposed is a contract that MPS has to agree with, but essentially what it would ensure is that the concerns we heard, that MPS would lose students, that teachers would be fired, that funding would get pulled away, that the board wouldn't have governance, and it would just start pulling more and more schools away. All of those are addressed. This contract would enable all the employees are still MPS employees. Teachers keep their salaries and their benefits. They don't lose students. The schools automatically would always revert back to MPS. That's not in the state law. That's in what we're proposing. So there's no scenario where you just lose more and more. They'd always go back. And the idea is, and we've met regularly with the school board and with MTEA and with Dr. Driver. And we want to even, we've said we were only going to do one school, and we'd like to pick it with them. But there's a timeline for different parts of the legislation, and we need to name at least one school, and I think it's about a week. And so and the school board has to vote to approve this contract. What I'm concerned about is that if they don't, Representative Coinga said just the other day, look, if we don't feel like progress is being made, we're going to, get more aggressive. And that either means new legislation or something else, which would be a lot more than one school. And here, the funding that would go to the Opportunity Schools Partnership Program, every dime, what we're proposing, would go back to MPS.
Wow.
All the teachers and all the, they keep their jobs and their benefits. They're not losing any students. We're only doing one school, and we want to bring more wraparound services where the county here can actually help. And we like, as MPS does, we agree we like the community schools model. But because you're right, there's been some contentiousness about it, and people not, I understand it. I mean, there's a lot of people who are skeptical about legislation from Madison, around MPS. I mean, generally it hasn't been good news. It's been less funding or, or other things. And, but what I'm concerned about is if we don't, if we can't make this work, it is not the case that the state legislature is just going to walk away, and I'm concerned about if they get more aggressive the way they do it, I'm worried about it.
You just really want people to be on board and totally understand that this is not something that you came up with. It is state mandated, and that your goal is to not only do what's going to be best for MPS, but also pick someone, which you did, who has a passion not only for education. I mean, all of his degrees came from universities right here in Wisconsin. And the thing is when you look at, and I can understand why you chose Dr. Means, because the Mequon-Thiensville School District has achieved many awards for all of the outstanding things that they've been able to accomplish. And but the only thing that I would question as a journalist is the issues that many of the students at Central City Schools in Milwaukee, of course, are very different than the issues of a suburban district like Mequon-Thiensville. It's one of the wealthiest school districts in the state, needless to say. And about 40% of MPS students are dealing with poverty. 81% qualify for free or reduced lunch, and homelessness is also an issue. So when you talk about how you educate students, all of those things that are outside of the classroom make a difference. How do you create a plan that can take some of the success from his school district and kind of put that over to MPS and make it work? Well,
you actually hit one of his points right on the head. Is some of the things he's been able to do, some programming decisions he's made and had a lot of success with in Mequon-Thiensville, he's interested in replicating with whatever school we'd be working with at MPS. But in terms of, can somebody who is a superintendent of Mequon really relate to what the issues are in Milwaukee? Maybe it would be harder if they'd grown up in Mequon, but, Damon grew up in Milwaukee and he went to MPS. And, as he always said, he's a proud MPS graduate and his wife's a principal. I mean, this is a family that's committed to public education. And one thing about the legislation is there's no funding right now for his position. I mean, Damon isn't doing this because he's trying to make money or Damon is doing this because he's passionate about public schools. He cares about the system he grew up in, and he wants to make a difference.
And he's still trying to juggle his ultimate responsibilities, which is the superintendent. So it is quite a lot to juggle and balance. But I think he is the right man for the job.
I think so too.
Yeah, I think we've established that.
I'm a fan. I'm a Damon fan.
This is the thing, as the commissioner of OSPP, what would be his ultimate goal, even if it is one school or turns into multiple schools? What would be the ultimate goal in turning these schools around? How would you go about doing that?
Well, he obviously can speak more specifically and frankly intelligently about this. I'm not an expert in education.
You're like, I just hire the ones that know how to do it. I get it.
Yeah, I like to think I'm good at picking people who are good at things. I will say this though, I mean, he has some very specific goals and he's put together a lot of information, a lot of specifics about the types of program, the specific partners he'd like to work with. All of which is public and shareable because we want to be, transparent with everybody. But his goal is to help MPS in any way we can do better for more kids, than we do now. If we can just help move the needle, the most important thing at the end of the day is if we can help more kids succeed, if we can see more kids graduating, more kids on a track that we'd like to see them on, regardless of what part of the district they're in, then that's important. And, the legislation says we're not going to go pick, the legislation is not about the MPS schools, and there's a bunch that are great. There's some great MPS schools. Yes. This legislation is about the schools that need help. And I think, the fact that you've got somebody who's willing to, unpaid, spend all this time knowing it's going to be hard and with all this controversy and go to the not the easy schools, the difficult schools, and at least try to make help is a great indicator of the kind of passion he brings to the job.
Yeah, and that's good to know. And I think that what we all would like to see ultimately is every school being fully resourced to ensure that all of our students are on the same playing field when it comes to learning. So when we can have that happen, then I think that a lot of the problems go away. But I think you're on the right track with having someone who is passionate first about education, passionate about Milwaukee Public Schools, and really does want to help make a difference without harming the school district as it is. So we've just got like 2 minutes. So since we're on the subject of young people, troubled prison up north, Lincoln Hills School for Boys. There continues to be headlines, and I'm just interested, I know there's a lot of different things involved, but how is the county involved with Lincoln Hills, and how do we get a grasp on what's going on there? We've got about a minute and a half.
So the basics are this. Lincoln Hills is a state-run facility. It's about 3.5 hours north of here. Milwaukee County is one of several counties that has juveniles who are up there. We have about 150 kids, and so when we, along with everybody else, started hearing about what the issues were, and the mistreatment and abuse and programming not happening as it should, which incidentally is continuing, we obviously are very concerned. The county pays the state to provide a level of programming that just is not being met. We can do better, and most other states have moved away from sending kids 3 hours away. The idea is have them close to their community where we have oversight, better programming, and programming that's different for the different level of risk. Some of these kids are much more high risk than others, but you put low risk kids around high risk kids and they become high risk kids. The frustration is it's been difficult because the state's had 3 now directors of Lincoln Hills since we started talking about this. They're on their 2nd state head of corrections. There's 3 investigations still going on. And we didn't wait. We're sending our staff up there all 3.5 hours. Some of them every other day are driving up there because we want to make sure that in the meantime, until we can get new facilities here, our kids have our eyes on them.
Okay, so when that happens, once all of the transitions and the changes have taken place, you'll have to come back and fill us in. Thank you so much for your time. It has been a pleasure talking with you. Of course, Chris Abele is the Milwaukee County Executive, and if you have any questions about anything that we've discussed today, you can log on to the website. That's going to do it for our show. I'm your host, Andrea Williams. As always, thank you for watching, and I do hope you join us again next week as we take another look at our issues in Milwaukee. Have a great day.